Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more, all covered now on Life Planning 101.
Welcome to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services here in the great town of Eastland, Texas. Want to welcome everybody in this week for a very special session. We have been doing a couple of our grandioso lunch and learns and dinner and learns, so to speak, at various locations in Fort Worth and Abilene. And we put together a little slideshow on, do you have an estate plan? So I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to go to our website if you have not been to already and subscribe to our newsletter. It's www.kennedy-financial.com. And you can access these slides because I think when we get through the show today, you're going to want some of this information to use it for yourself. But do you have an estate plan is the title. And we wanted to definitely be able to re-record for all those people that were unable to join us at those lunch and learns. And as a firm, we're always really big on education, especially in the way of life planning, and today is no different. So I wanted to start out by telling you a story about a lady. She went to put flowers on her mother's grave, and as she's standing there, she hears a man, and he's just moaning, and he's hunched over another man's grave, and he's just repeatedly saying, "Why did you die? Why did you die?" And she could see this man was in real pain. So she thought, well, I better walk over and maybe see if I can console him. So she did. And she asked, "Sir, if you don't mind, how did you know this man?" And his reply was, "I didn't." Well, of course, she was very perplexed. And so she continued to dig a little bit for it. She said, "Well, I can see that your grief is obvious. I don't quite understand what you mean by you didn't know this man." And he replied, "This man was my wife's first husband." So I love that. We're not going to talk about second marriages and divorces, but we are going to get into some really important things. And I just want to start out by getting you to pause and answer something for me. But, if you were wanting to get an estate plan done or someone is wanting to get an estate plan done, tell me, what is it they do? What process do they go through? And I'm sure you're thinking, well, I guess they head to an attorney. And that's right. They go to an attorney, and at that attorney's office, what do they get you to do? And I had a funny response to this during one of the presentations. They said, well, they charge you money just for walking in the door. And, it is so true, right? That attorneys do get paid by the hour, most of them anyway. But the actual process is they get you to fill out a fact find with your basic information, what you own, what you owe, and how you want to distribute that down to the next generation or wherever you're going to distribute that down. But I want to take a second. I want to stop right there now that I've got your mind in that frame of reference. And I want to switch gears on you totally. And I want you to kind of go through an exercise. I want you to write down 3 things as if you were introducing yourself to a room of people that didn't know much about you. I want you to write down, my name is, of course, my name is Angela Robinson. I come from a people who, you fill in the blank. I come from a people who. And from this, I have learned, you fill in the blank. So by the end of it, you have, my name is, I come from a people who, and from this, I have learned. I would encourage you to spend some time on this because you're going to understand why it's so important here in a minute. My name is Angela Robinson. I come from a people who never took no for an answer. Now, I know many of you that are familiar with us as Kennedy Financial Services probably know my dad's story. He came from a very poor home. His parents were raised in the Depression. His granddad was actually shot. And so his dad ended up going to work, I think, at 12 years old just to help the family out. And, so him growing up was the second generation of that. And his parents did the best they could. They were extremely hard workers, but always looked at what was right in front of them out of fear for what they might lose. And My dad, I'll never forget, we were driving back from a funeral one weekend, and he drove us down this dirt road. We're like, where are we going? And he said, well, I want to go see about a tree. Okay. Well, this tree is the tree we had heard stories about all our life, because it was the tree that he made a decision that there had to be a better way. And that someday he would have a ranch out his front door and a lake out his back door. Well, if you've been to our KFS barbecue, if you have been to the famous Hanging Tree Ranch in Eastland, Texas, you will know the end of the story, that he made it happen. My mom, most of you probably don't know her story. She and her two siblings were actually abandoned by their mother when they were very young, and their dad remarried, and I think it was a little bit of a Cinderella stepmom story, unfortunately, and maybe even a little worse. And her dad was not the fairy tale hero necessarily, because he was working all the time and trying to make ends meet. And so there was a lot of rub created in their relationship. But my mom chose to heal that relationship with her father years later. And she chose to be a great mom when it came her time. So from all this, I have learned that we have a choice. My gosh, don't we? Especially in this great nation we live in. We have a choice to break chains of bondage. We have a choice to break generational curses on our family. We have a choice to build a life that we just love. We have a choice to do everything with purpose. We have a choice to live life on purpose. And I guess that's why I get to do what I get to do every single day, because this comes from the heart. It comes from a real space that I know we get to help people live life on purpose, because everybody has the choice to do that, especially living where we live today. So why do I tell you all this? And I'm going to encourage you again, if you want to pull up during the break, go to our website, www.kennedy-financial.com, and get subscribed to the newsletter. You can go in our learning center. You should be able to see this presentation built in there. It is simply called, Do You Have an Estate Plan? And I say that because when we come back from the break, I'm going to be sharing some things that you probably want to see, you probably want to visualize, and you might want to be able to share. So stay tuned right here on Life Planning 101. Welcome back to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services, and we are talking about an estate plan, but yeah, we're doing it in the life planning kind of way, right? And if you remember, years ago, we had a guest speaker. His name was Frank Mullins, and he actually helps people rewrite the family history. One of the favorite titles I remember him talking about was Pigs to Rigs, and writing the family history of how they immigrated over to the United States and got into the oil business and created the family legacy out of that. And it was pretty powerful. And so he shared with us what he calls the family balance sheet. And in this family balance sheet, it consists of 5 different things. It's what you pass on to the next generation or to your heirs. And, first of which is the human piece of that balance sheet. And it's who you are, the gifts that you have, what made you who you are, your story, the wisdom that you've gained throughout your life, maybe those little things that you've just figured out at 70 years old, that ripe old age, right? Or ripe young age, I should say. And then the next piece is the intellectual. What have you learned? What were your biggest successes in life, and how did you get there? What about your failures? Maybe that's even more important. And how did you survive them? How did you fall down and get back up? That's what we're always telling our kids. We started doing that when we were going to go skiing the first year. We told them, if you fall down, what do? You got what I'm saying? You get back up. So now we use it all the time. Fall down, what do? Get back up, right? The social aspect is another piece of this. The people in your life. Who are the most important people? Why? Sometimes this is outside your family, your mentors, your friends. What have they taught you? How have they taught you? What about the people that maybe you've taught and how that's impacted you? The people you've helped and how that's impacted you. The spiritual piece. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Where did you find him? How? What were the hardships that allowed you to do that? Where did faith step in that you couldn't? Or how are you giving back? And why are you doing what you're doing to give back? And then the financial aspect, the results of all that blood, sweat, and tears over the years. So we've got those 5 pieces: the human, the intellectual, the social, the spiritual, and the financial. And I want you to do something for me. If you were able to pull up this balance sheet and look at it, great. If not, I want you to visualize human, intellectual, social, spiritual, financial. And I want to ask you a question. If you could guarantee that you could pass on every one of these pieces of capital to your children, your family, every single one but one, which piece are you going to leave out? That's a lot of hard studying, but most of the time it's that financial piece. So why is it that when we go to build that estate plan, the first thing we do is we go deal with the money, if that's the least important thing to pass on? So I want to share another story with you, if that's all right. I was down in San Antonio recently. I belong to what's called a Pinnacle Study Group, and I'm just so honored to be a part of that group. In fact, I had a couple great clients that we work with, families that work with, help me get into that group. And I tell you what, it's a group of 18 men and 2 women, and the intellectual capital among them is just unbelievable. My head's usually swimming a couple days in, and this time was no different. And I get down there and I realize that I have to do a presentation kind of last minute. I think, oh my gosh, what am I going to be able to share with this group of lots of wisdom? And many of them, I learn from them all the time. How can I possibly add value? And I thought about sharing our legacy planning process, because we do take that life planning approach first before we get into the money, because we all know the money is just a tool. So I went to share this, and I kind of had thrown together a presentation real quick and pulled up some of the tools that we used. And I get this text, and it's a text from a prayer group of women that I belong to, and it's a YouTube video. And I had a hard time not breaking down right there, because this is the same video that my grandmother had showed me at a very special moment that we had together. We were very, very close. And by the way, this was my grandmother that ended up being my mom's second stepmom. But she was the only grandmother I ever knew from my mom's side. And she had developed aphasia later on in life and was in a care facility. And if you don't know what aphasia is, it's the inability, you kind of lose your ability to communicate altogether. She was all there, but she couldn't communicate. So unable to do so, she kept pointing at this DVD, and she wanted me to put it in, and she wanted me to watch it with her. And she kept pointing to it, and we went through, finally figured out which one. So I put in this DVD, and we go to watch it. And it's pretty amazing. I assume we're going to put a link out there with the, where you can go and watch this yourself on YouTube. But it's Carrie Underwood and Vince Gill singing How Great Thou Art. And if you haven't seen it, there's a lot of emotions that can run deep with that video, just watching it. Just incredible. But we watched that together. We cried together. She soon passed after that visit. And at her funeral, she had lined out everything in her entire funeral. And this song was one that played. Oh, I was just a bucket, no doubt. But what I realized was this was her final gift to me, a piece of her legacy that she was telling me we would see each other again, because she was going home and she hoped that I'd be able to go with her someday. So my grandmother left a legacy that had nothing to do with the legal documents. And as I was putting together the presentation for all of our clients, it was pretty amazing, because my kids come up and they said, "Who's that picture of?" And if you see the slides, you'll see my beautiful grandmother. And I said, "Well, that's your grandmother." And we watched that video together. So her legacy went on another generation that she never knew about. Now, when we come back, I want to talk about how can you leave your legacy. And I'm going to get you started on some things that you need to think about, touch on, reflect on. And you're not going to want to miss it right here on Life Planning 101. Welcome back to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services. And if you hadn't had a chance yet, make sure you go to our website, www.kennedy-financial.com. This was a presentation that we actually used at two different lunch and learn, dinner and learn type events with our families that we work with. And we're going to be redistributing out to the families that weren't able to join us. And we want to make sure that you can see the slides because they are pretty powerful and there's some good tools in here, especially as we approach this last segment. And we were talking about your estate plan, right? And so the question is how can you leave your legacy? Your legacy. And if you missed the first segment of the show, you might want to go back, but we'll talk a little more on what that means. And the first thing is you don't start with your legal documents, right? We're always talking about money and what it's for, not for what it is, but we always treat it for what it is first. And we get it so wrong, and then it doesn't match what we're trying to accomplish. Well, your legacy plan is no different. So how do you do this? Well, there was a Wall Street Journal piece a long time ago, and I couldn't find it, couldn't dig it up, but it talked about the 4 pillars of family continuity. And the whole premises was to look at families that had done it right. You know, they had been able to get through generations of success without falling apart. And what did they all have in common? And there were really 4 things as themes. And number 1 was a shared vision, the family. Number 2 was the knowledge of the family history. I thought this was interesting because I see this getting lost so much. You know, maybe you know about your grandparents or your great-grandparents, but you know, do your kids, do your grandkids, and, you know, they know why you have what you have or do what you do. You know, you come from a people who, and because this, what, right? Going back to that question. Financial literacy. We all know it's extremely important, especially if you're going to try to keep wealth. And then number 4, last, but my opinion might be the most important, and that's communication and genuine trust. This is where truth and grace begin. All progress starts by telling the truth, and everyone has an elephant in the room when it comes to their family. And grace is something that we all need as a family. It doesn't mean that you ignore that elephant in the room, but you figure out how to deal with it. You figure out how to make it work within your legacy plan. You get help on how to deal with it. Because I will tell you this, many times have we traveled down the road of not addressing the elephant first and foremost, and we get to the bottom line, and then we have to start all the way over 3 or 4 times. And so I am almost willing to just go into a room and sit down and say, okay, what is the elephant in the room for this family? And maybe we'll get it out of the way, right? Start working there. Because if we start by telling ourselves the truth, we can get a lot further. I recently heard a professional in our industry say, we live in a day and age of specialization, where generalization is no longer valuable. Well, I would agree that we live in a day of specialization, and I think I mentioned this on a show a few weeks ago, but I don't at all agree with his statement. And I look at it like this. I look at it like a jigsaw puzzle. 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. What's the most important part of a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle? You might be thinking the borders or the edges or the corners or something, but have you ever tried to do a jigsaw puzzle without the cover? Now, I know a mathematician and an engineer that said yes, but other than that, right, that was just for challenge. And that's kind of like life, you know, with the vast of information out there, not just with professionals, but with the internet, you can find almost anything you need or you think you need, right? And we have, in some ways, reverted back to this 80s style thinking where you had all these different specialists and all these different pieces, but no one has the box. No one's able to see the picture besides you, and maybe you're not the right one to know the right questions to ask. After all, why are you going to someone to ask information anyway? So how does that all play out? My goal today is to do this. I want to challenge you as to what it means to have an estate plan. Because the reality is that you can have a superb estate plan written by the top professionals and not really have one at all. Because you don't have a legacy plan that your estate plan supports. Here's a truth to leave you with. You have an opportunity to save your family or destroy it. So how will that play out? And you might say, well, I'm not responsible for my kids. I think I mentioned this on a show a few weeks ago too. But did any of your children write you a letter and tell you that they want to be reborn? I bet they didn't. So let the buck stop with you. Your responsibility. How can you move forward to have a legacy plan that your estate plan supports? Make sure you go online. We've got some great assessments that's going to be with this article to help you kind of do a self-assessment of where you're at right now with your legacy planning and what you may need to prioritize or work on. We've also got our legacy planning questionnaire, and we can be happy to discuss our legacy planning process and how we go about that with any family. This is truly a love labor for us because it is just so much fun to watch families succeed and families get excited about having good Christmases and Thanksgivings after the matriarch and patriarch are gone. And there's nothing better for us to see a fruit of our labor for that to play out. So with that, my name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services. God bless everyone. Have a wonderful week. And we hope that you join us each and every week on Life Planning 101 as we do our best to bring relevant and fun and enticing information that really you don't get anywhere because it's not holistic in nature. So have a great week, everyone. Join us next week on Life Planning 101.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Don't forget to learn how our sister company can assist you with all of your tax, bookkeeping, and consulting needs. You can find out more at briscoeandassociates.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.